Time is now 9 a.m., March 14th, 2023. Now calling to order the Oconee County Conservation Board. Present, we have Gordon Becker, Emlyn Jones, Taylor Howard, Ryan Keys, Andrew Smith, also myself, Scotty Walker. And we have a quorum. This brings down to our first item, which is the election of the board chair. We do not have a chair at this particular time. And I would like to recommend Andy Smith to be the chair of the Oconee County Conservation Board.
I'll second that if he's agreeable to it.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. Second by Ryan. Any opposes? We now have Andy Smith as chair of the Oconee County Conservation Board.
Mr. Chairman, or Vice Chairman, could I just reel it back a little bit? So generally what you need to do is ask if there's subsequent nominations, and it doesn't require a second. So you have a nomination for Andy. Ask if there's another nomination for somebody else to serve as chair.
Okay.
And if there's not, then you'll have the whole board vote for yea or nay for Mr.
Okay.
Smith.
Okay, we will reverse it. Is there any nomination for the chair of the Oconee County Conservation Board Bank at this time?
In addition to Andy, correct?
In addition to Andy, right, Andy Smith.
And so then you just vote on Andy.
Okay. Can I get a second?
I second, yeah, I've already.
Okay, any opposes? So Andy,
You need to
We gotta
vote
call
the actual
vote.
Say all in favor.
all in favor, let it be known by the word aye. Aye. So opposes, ayes have it, and Andy, you are
Okay.
the chair. Would you like to? as chair?
Yeah, may as well.
All right.
Assume the chair. Yeah, the chair. Thanks, good.
Thank you.
Okay. So next item on there is we are going to go into, or propose to go into executive session to discuss, or to get legal advice related to the request by the Natural Land Trust related to the Whetstone Hill property. Do we need a motion and a second for, do I have a motion to go into executive session?
And state the purpose just as it's written.
Yeah, whoever makes the motion, state your purpose for the motion.
I'll make the motion. We go into executive session to discuss and receive legal advice relating to the request to transfer the Whetstone Hill property to the United States Forest Service.
Okay, any discussion related to that motion? All in favor, aye, and raised hands?
Aye.
Okay, all right, so that's what we'll do. And we'll follow David to the A motion to reconvene.
I'll make a motion to reconvene.
Got a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. All right, so we were out there for a long time. I don't know if that's what you want to hear. So now we are at the next place on our agenda. Somebody got their agenda sheet? Okay. Which is discuss or take action regarding request to transfer Whetstone Hill property from Natural Land Trust to United States Forest Service. Do we have a motion in regard to this discussion item?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve their request
Okay.
to the Forest Service and allow discussion to that motion.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Does that address what we would do with the funding?
Discuss that.
Under the discussion, perhaps.
Yeah, you just need a second so you can,
Yeah, I'll
so you can get
second.
the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now we'll open our discussion. If you would like for one of you, Frank or Mac, to come and just, articulate your request to us again.
Sure.
Okay.
And three of you have heard me say some of this before, but three were not here. So briefly, if you let me introduce myself. My name is Frank Holloman. I'm the volunteer board president of Natural Land Trust. And with me is Mac Stone, who is our sole employee, our executive director. Does a fantastic job. And one reason I'm speaking instead of Mac is that I'm a native of Oconee County, as Mr. Keys heard me say before. I grew up in Seneca. I went to Seneca High School, very active in Oconee County, and then went off to college. And my wife and I were married. She's from the metropolis of Conaross, they know as a suburb of Walhalla. And we own the family farm that she grew up on. Her name is Barker, Ann Barker. And we own the family farm at the corner of Hess Highway and 183, which has a Westminster address. But it's they go to school in Walhalla. And as president of Natural Land Trust, I have encouraged us to be very active in conservation in Oconee County, because that's where I'm from. We now live in Greenville, even though we have a home here, but our principal residence is in Greenville. And you may remember the big battle over protecting Stump House Mountain. That was my big crusade, and Natural Land Trust led that effort in many ways. And we have recently worked to restore and have restored a brook trout stream at the old Burroughs Saloon site, if you know where that is, of Oconee State Park, and have been involved in a number of, a couple of years ago, we saved some 500 acres of Oconee bell habitat south of Lake Jacassie. And we got involved in this project because this property is adjacent to the National Forest. It is also adjacent to Whetstone Creek. Whetstone Creek is the most important tributary of the Chattooga River on the South Carolina side. Most of the water of Chattooga River actually comes from Georgia, but of the South Carolina side of the Chattooga, Whetstone Creek is the most important. It also has some pollution issues. And so one thing we want to do is protect this property for those reasons, and also to improve the water quality. And the second reason, another reason, was it may be, although this has not been confirmed, but there's belief it may be the site of a long sought Cherokee village in that area. There's been an effort, archaeological effort, to try to find where that is, and some people think it may be there. And we were also fortunate that the family, I just happen to know, I went to high school in Seneca with a member of the family. It's an old Oconee County family, the Lyles. And the executor or personal representative was interested in seeing it protected. So oftentimes you can't do these transactions unless the landowner wants something good to happen. So we're able to put it together, but we always have to figure out a way to pay for it. Because we'd have to have $1 billion to go around and buy all the property we do. So we have, not literally, but millions and millions and millions. We don't. So we have to find ways to finance it. And there's always a different strategy. The only way this could happen, in the end, we went through lots of conniptions for several years trying to figure out a way to do it. And the way it ended up, the only way we could get this to happen was ultimately for it to go to the Forest Service. That's the only way the property could be protected and conserved and not be subject to being sold, because the Lyles family had it on the market and could be sold for any purpose, as you well know. So, in the course of that process, the prior Upstate Forever had been working on this effort and ultimately could not find a way to make it happen. And that's a complicated story, but in the course of that, they had applied to this bank for a grant to help with the strategy they had before. And when we finally found a way to get it protected, everyone, including the bank, then bank board, as I'm sure you've seen the material, recognized it would be through the Forest Service. So that was the basis on which this grant was made, and it was a basis on which we went forward to get it protected. Well, you may know if you've dealt with the Forest Service, that doesn't happen overnight. So we spent a couple of years working through the Forest Service process. And before we showed up at the February meeting, we had a meeting with 5, 6 Forest Service property representatives from the region. And they were very clear with us that this transaction could not go forward to the Forest Service with the Oconee Conservation Bank grant in place because of the impact, as far as they were concerned, and they thought their lawyers were concerned, of the recorded grant agreement and the deed notation on title for the purposes of their organizational structure and acquisition. So, we came to the bank and said the only solution we have to carry out the conservation goal that was everyone agreed to at the beginning is to pay the bank back the money, which we are going to do and prepared to do. And then we will, of course, fund that, refund out of our own resources, and then we will ultimately then be able to transfer the property to the Forest Service and complete the conservation objective we started with. So we talked with Mr. Root a couple of times about this, and the last time we talked with him, we talked about putting all this in a letter, and we were thinking about doing that, and then I went home, went to bed, woke up the next morning, I thought, it's not a good thing to put something like this in a letter, let's go explain it in person, people can ask questions. So Mac and I came to the last meeting, and we presented it to explain it, because we consider, first of all, I forgot too, another thing we protected was Oconee Town, the site of Cherokee Village after which the county is named, which is one of our great accomplishments. The chief of the Cherokee Nation came for the dedication. And the wampum belt we got from the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma is on display at the Museum of the Cherokee in South Carolina on Shore Street. Anyway, I got diverted by that. But we consider everybody partners in this effort, so we didn't want to just drop a letter on you, but instead tell you where we were and why we had to do what we have to do. So we would prefer to have gone forward as we were, but we don't have that option. So at the last meeting, the then chair asked me, or the vice chair, the presiding lady, asked me if we were asking for approval, and I'm sure Mr. Smith remembers, Mr. Root, where I said, we believe we can go forward, but it would be helpful, and we would like to have the bank's approval, so everything would be on a friendly basis, and we would all be working together on the project, and hopefully on things in the future. That's the background.
So you're asking for, and thank you, Mr. Holman,
Yes.
you're asking for our approval of giving the money back to us. And that,
And the transfer to the,
and that the transfer that you're gonna do with or without our approval
yes,
is within what we all contemplated
yes,
when this whole thing started.
correct,
That's essentially what you're putting
Yes.
before us.
yes, correct, yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Any thoughts among the board?
Has anyone given any consideration to the, I'll say, the time value of money or interest on the money was put forward, 3 years ago?
That's correct. You've had $66,000 of our money that we could have been making interest off of.
Correct, and we could consider that. I would tell you, not today, as people my age are aware of, this would be true, but in the past, the interest rate we would have gotten on that money would be very small. 1%, 2%. I don't know what it would have been. We could go back and check, but we could do that. We could consider it, certainly.
Okay. I think for us, it's.
Oh, and the other thing, if I could.
Yes, sir.
From my perspective, and this Forest Service people made this point, and from the bank's mission viewpoint, the ultimate goal is going to be achieved, and you get the money back. So it's,
So we don't have to do anything.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it's sort of I hate this term, but people use it all the time, win-win in a sense. We accomplish a goal and you get the money back. So you can spend it on another, devote it to another conservation effort.
Well, let's just be honest, we need the money. It's a fact. I mean, we have a finite account right now. We're not in the sector of benefactors that are setting things up for us yet.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, we don't have to go out and raise the $66,000.
Yes,
Just come
right.
back to us. Any other thoughts or questions?
If this land were to be transferred to the Forest Service, what would prevent them from building a maintenance facility on it?
Let me back up a minute and just talk about conservation in general, because I've been working in this area as a volunteer for a quarter century now. Here's the reality that we work in. I would like, from my perspective, for me to control personally a multi-gazillion dollar nonprofit that would dictate exactly what would happen on every property we protected, and we would own them all. That world does not exist. We have to rely on sources of funding. By and large, given real estate prices and what we're dealing with, that is almost always involves public sources of funding. And what that means is, most of the time, not always, the property ultimately is going to be owned by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, South Carolina Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, the United States Forest Service, or a county park system. We helped Oconee County Parks expand Choram County Park twice. That's what it's going to mean. So here, and which agency ends up owning it often depends on the physical situation. Here, it's adjacent to the National Forest. It's not adjacent to any DNR property. There's no state park there, et cetera. So that's it. And so in every instance, when it goes to a public agency, almost every instance, it is subject to some conceivable, if you stay up at night like I often do and worry about things, there's some conceivable risk something may happen. But, now I'm going to answer your question directly. One is the mission of the Forest Service, which is to protect the natural resources, and it's in multiple use agencies. Second thing is, unlike if it were acquired by even Natural Land Trust for that matter, and we just owned it, which we're not going to do, or some private party, with the Forest Service, there's a public process they have to go through that involves public comment and hearings, and they have to do an annual forestry management plan that gives the public, county governments for that matter, if they want to do it, any member of the public, I've sent in comments personally as an individual citizen, get input on usage. So I think what would impact it there, it seems unlikely to me that would happen because of what I just recited, the waterway and where it's located and the Cherokee Village issue. Just imagine a federal agency having to work through the archaeological issues of that. I mean, that's quite a major undertaking that people could object to, including, and often do, and it ties them up for years and years. So nobody can guarantee 50 years from now what may happen in any institution. But there is a public process available that is not otherwise available if this property were to go to other ownership.
Do you have any indications of what may be done with that piece of land if it were to be transferred to the Forest Service?
We do not, the Forest Service hasn't promised us anything, nor have they told us of any use other than it will be part of the National Forest. No, we do not have any. We haven't been told we want to get it for X purpose. What the issue often with the Forest Service is it within their legal boundary? And secondly, is it the stuff we work on with the Forest Service, is it of an ecological and natural importance that we would want it added to the National Forest? So they won't support the acquisition of every parcel that's adjacent to the forest by any means. Some they can't because it's outside the legal boundary. Some, even within the legal boundary, they would say, no, that's not a priority for us because it doesn't have those characteristics. We've never worked with them on a project where they wanted it for infrastructure purposes. That's not really what we do. But if that was happening, I would tell you.
They want it for Whetstone Creek, it's for the hydrological value of it, in terms of preservation.
Sure.
As you probably know,
And Mac,
the
you're
wild,
welcome to come up
Yeah.
and introduce yourself. And
That's all right.
and as you well know, the Chattooga River is a national wild and scenic river, but it's all national forest. You know, it's a national forest resource, even though it has the overlay of protection of National Wild and Scenic River. Now, Whetstone Creek isn't in the river corridor, but it is the major source of water from the South Carolina side.
I've spoken with an adjacent landowner who is very concerned that there might be a dove field there. Have there been discussion with the National Land Trust and the Forest Service about a potential dove field?
No.
Discussions with you guys, with anybody about a dove field? Any public entity?
Maybe 3 years ago, when we were going through this process of where could this property go, who could be a takeout strategy, who could help us close the funding loop, we asked DNR, and there were originally some ideas thrown around, oh, maybe this could be a dove field, and that's where it stopped. And that
No
was it.
further discussion, no
There was no
development of
further
that idea?
discussion. That's it.
DNR is not going to own it. We had to,
It's
they
my
weren't
understanding
interested.
that the Duffields in Oconee County are often cooperatively managed, owned, Forest Service and DNR. So there'll be, if it was a Duffield, I think there's potential for DNR to be involved in like the management of it. But nothing like that, I mean.
No, nothing that we've talked about, and with the Forest Service, when we've asked this, they've said, no, we don't have any interest in doing that.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, from.
That's not something we would urge or encourage. But once we, as you say, once we transfer it, it will be in the public domain, subject to public comment and all that.
You might tell them that it's an issue that on the ground is controversial, and it might not be welcomed if it was done, if it ultimately goes to them.
It would not, I don't know this, but it wouldn't surprise me that if conservation groups like the Chattooga Conservancy might oppose that because of the presence of Whetstone Creek. And most people who shoot shotguns have lead shells. Not everybody, you know, it changes over time, but still, it wouldn't surprise me if that would engender opposition
Sure.
if that came up.
Oh, hunting is often a conservation purpose, but it
Yes.
can be site-specific,
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
public, or negative
We
impact
do
on
not
water
oppose
quality.
hunting at all. And a lot of our properties, while we own them, before they go somewhere, we enroll them in the wildlife management program of DNR, but that's,
Do we have any more questions for the natural interest? Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you all.
So, our motion's on the board to approve their request. I want to touch base with our ordinance. Part of the issue for us is that this is an issue that's not in the ordinance. It's not in any of the documents essentially that we have, the grant agreement or the ratification document. The idea that the transfer might not occur is present in our ordinance, in the grant agreement, in the ratification, but not for this reason. The reasons that are in those documents would be if the conservation purposes could not be fulfilled, that then we might be in a situation where we would require by our ordinance or by the grant agreement indemnification. That's not what's at issue here. You're just wanting to give the money back. That's not in our ordinance. You're intending to do what you were intending to do all along. It's just that the Forest Service can't accept the property with our little bit of deed language and with our grant agreements in place. We've got two provisions in section 2405, D and F, for fee simple transfers, transactions we've granted money for. If there's going to be a subsequent transfer, we can approve that by majority vote. Okay, that's D. F is if there's a fee simple situation and it can't be consummated in conservation, we've got a process there that requires a unanimous vote. And we're not in that situation. So we are most akin, I think, to that. If we're going to do anything here, we just do it by a majority vote. It's kind of a one-off situation. So I think from a legal point of view, after executive session with Mr. Root and looking at our ordinance, that's kind of where we are. If, whatever decision we make on this, it can be and should be by a majority vote, not a unanimous vote. We're in a little bit of unknown territory, but it's an unusual situation. But I think it's fairly clear what the situation is. And so it's going to happen with us or without us. So that's kind of what's on the table for us. Any other thoughts among us before we call for a vote? And is our motion specific enough, you think?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Mr. Jones, tell me if this is essentially it, because the request was made last time and talked about this time, but the request from Natural Land is a request for the OCCB to approve the transfer essentially as originally contemplated by the parties, but because of some changed circumstances regarding the Forest Service receipt of the property to receive the grant funds back, understanding there's not gonna be any language that encumbers the transfer to the Forest Service. That's essentially where you stand now. That was.
That's what's kind of changing for us, is that we are almost saying that we are not requiring that deed language, in a sense.
Yeah, that's the difference than what was talked about, when you did the ratification agreement.
Right. David, in one scenario, does could or should the grant agreement be rescinded? Or do we sort of just step back and say, hey, we never knew you?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't rescind the grant agreement. I think as if y'all are gonna get, to the part of tendering the funds back, if I were their attorney, I might request that that be done at the same time. I'm not their attorney, so.
Right.
But yes, I don't think that's a bad idea for either parties. It's not something that we need to take the initiative to do. For you all, it's a matter of approving the transfer, the mechanics of it. Y'all need to make sure it's worked out so you can effect the transfer best.
So if we did approve their request, we'll take the money back, and two, you're going forward with how we originally contemplated. What's the grant agreement mean at that point?
I think it's kind of for naught. It doesn't mean a whole lot of anything. I'm just saying, so it's rendered kind of an inoperable agreement, I suppose. But where I come in from Natural Land's position, I want that agreement essentially rescinded, canceled, whatever you want to call it, so that part of the transfer and acceptance of the funds, OCCB understands the grant agreement. It's canceled, rescinded, receiving these funds as consideration for that, and approving the transfer. So I'm assuming your attorneys or y'all are gonna have a document that comes with the funds if they approve it or not, however it goes. But you're gonna have a document that comes with the grant agreement, says, all right, here's your money back, with the understanding that X, Y, Z. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave that with them. But if you all, with the motion as I just restated it, assuming there's no other amendments or whatever, it accomplishes that goal. You're approving it without further written encumbrances, right? So that grant agreement would be one, the deed language is one. They will take your approval and run with it right here.
So it might serve, will it serve the Forest Service to have the grant agreement truly rescinded?
I think that would be helpful too, yes.
It just makes the whole, the transaction that we're talking about here cleaner if that grant agreement is not on the table anymore in any way, shape, or form, I would think.
Yeah, pleasure knowing you. Come back. We're still friends. Any other discussion? Okay, so the motion on the table being that we honor their request to approve their direction with the Forest Service and to accept the money back. That's it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. I think you're good to go.
And
Thank you very much.
We'll bring it back to the chair for signature if required. If they have some sort of release or something that says, hey, we want release from the grant agreement, from the language. If it goes outside, obviously the confines of this motion, then we'll have to have a meeting. But if it's just, we're gonna give the money back, no strings further, aside from we're transferring it to the Forest Service, then I can just do that with the chair for his signature.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second that motion.
Okay. All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.